Ethan Cole stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror of a budget hotel. His face, now speckled with salt and pepper stubble, and the once vibrant eyes that had graced business magazine covers, now held a quiet heaviness. The beard was a result of 2 weeks spent undercover, far removed from his usual glamour. The simple cotton shirt, faded jeans, and worn-out shoes he wore were a far cry from what anyone would expect from the powerful CEO of Golden Harvest, a renowned national bakery chain. His tailored suits and familiar Rolex watch had been left at home, along with the version of himself who wore them. He ran a hand through his purposefully tousled hair, an important detail in his disguise. Taking a deep breath, he looked himself in the eye and whispered, "Eli, ready for your first day at Golden Harvest?" The fake name felt foreign, but the flutter in his chest was anything but. It reminded him of the early days, back when he had nothing but a dream and a small bank loan. 15 years ago, Golden Harvest was just a vision, born in a rented kitchen. Now it had expanded into 37 cities across the country, praised for its quality and artisan flair. But success, Ethan had come to realize, is a double-edged sword. It can cover up the rot within. Profit margins were shrinking. Employee turnover was higher than ever, and a creeping fatigue haunted each quarterly report. Pages that had kept him awake at night. He'd brought in consultants, analysts, strategists. None could pinpoint the problem. Then he remembered the words of his late father, a man who had built a construction empire from nothing. "To know what's wrong, you have to get your hands dirty." He slung a cheap backpack, one he'd bought in a rush at the airport, over his shoulder and stepped out of the hotel. The early morning air bit at his skin, more effective than coffee at waking him up. He drove a nondescript rental sedan through Seattle's quiet streets. No one would guess the man behind the wheel was the founder of Golden Harvest, now hiding in plain sight as a new corporate trainee. His destination was the flagship store downtown, a location lauded for its product quality and customer service, yet it displayed troubling signs, inconsistent profits and constant transfer requests from staff. Something didn't add up. He parked a block away to avoid attention, then walked toward the familiar red brick building, its golden sign still unlit. Through the foggy glass, a warm light glowed inside. He glanced at his watch. 4:45 a.m. A new day was about to begin, and he was here, an outsider in the very world he had created. As his eyes scanned the kitchen beyond the storefront, he stopped. Inside, a woman with chestnut hair tied neatly back moved with quiet grace. Her small frame carried an intensity. She was folding dough like it was a piano concerto she'd memorized by heart. He couldn't look away. And in that moment, Ethan realized she might be the key to whatever has been hiding behind the polished surface of this store. "She's always like that," Derek said quietly, glancing over at the woman. "Never joins conversations, never goes out to lunch, never takes a day off. Comes in, works like her life depends on it, then disappears." Before Ethan could reply, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. A tray of uncooked pastries had hit the floor, flour and dough scattered everywhere. Tyler, a new young hire, stood frozen in shock, face red with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to," he stammered, eyes wide and panicked. But before Derek or Ethan could move, Lena was already there, kneeling beside the mess. "It's all right," she said gently but firmly. "First rule of baking: accidents happen." She began gathering the salvageable dough with practiced speed. Ethan stepped in to help, but she raised a flour-dusted hand to stop him. "I've got it," she said, glancing briefly at him. Her amber-flecked brown eyes were calm but distant, as if separated by a wall no one could cross. Then she turned back to the floor, working as though the moment had never happened. That afternoon, Ethan was assigned to kitchen support during the rush. Miguel, the head baker, gave quick instructions. "L.A., help Lena with the almond croissants." Lena didn't say a word as Ethan approached. She pushed a piece of dough toward him. "Fold it like this," she demonstrated, effortlessly creating perfect triangles. "Not too tight, not too loose." Ethan clumsily folded a few on purpose, not wanting to reveal how experienced he really was. Lena noticed immediately. "Here," she said, placing her hands over his to guide him. "Feel the dough's resistance. It'll tell you what it needs." Her hands were calloused, marked with old burns, hands shaped by years of labor and fire. In her touch, Ethan felt not just skill, but sacrifice. As her sleeve shifted, he caught a glimpse of a small tattoo on her wrist, a simple flame. "You've done this before," she said, narrowing her eyes. Ethan froze, a jolt of anxiety rippling through him. "Just good with my hands, I guess," he replied casually. She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded slightly and returned to her task. "Well, at least you're not terrible. That's more than I can say for most trainees." The day flew by. Batches of bread and pastries rolled out one after another, the rich smell of butter and yeast filling the store. By closing, Ethan's back ached, his feet throbbed, a clear reminder of how far he'd drifted from this kind of work. While others wrapped up and planned post-shift drinks, Lena kept cleaning, scrubbing industrial ovens, hauling bags of flour from the storeroom, mopping the kitchen floor like it was a sacred space. "You don't have to do all this," Miguel said. "We can split it up." "I don't mind," she replied without looking up. When everyone else left, Ethan watched her change out of her apron, revealing a faded blue button-up and worn jeans. No goodbyes, no hellos. She quietly exited through the back. Curious, Ethan followed from a distance. She didn't head toward a car. Instead, she walked up to an old bicycle chained to a lamppost, clipped her backpack onto the rack, and pedaled into the glowing dusk of the city. That night, back in his hotel room, Ethan sat staring at his phone's notes. The store's operations were fine, but Lena, she was the anomaly. Her precision, her dedication, her self-imposed isolation, and the kicker, her pay. According to her file, she made only the base wage for her position. No bonuses, no incentives, nothing, despite creating the products that kept customers lining up out the door. He opened his laptop and searched the internal system. Lena Hart, 34, joined 8 years ago as an assistant baker. Outstanding performance reviews, repeatedly declined promotions. She had built a reputation with her hands, yet never sought the spotlight. "What's your story, Lena Hart?" Ethan murmured, as if she could hear him through the screen. A new notification popped up, a shift extension request submitted just the day before. She was already working 6 days a week. Ethan leaned back, running a hand through his hair. In 15 years, he had seen all types of employees. Those chasing titles, those biding time, those just getting by. But Lena Hart was different. She worked as if trying to atone for something, as if every loaf of bread was a promise, a prayer, a piece of penance. And he knew, if he was going to save Golden Harvest, he'd have to start with her. The next morning, Ethan arrived at 4:50 a.m. But as always, Lena was already there. Her figure bent over the marble countertop, her hands moving with silent purpose. "Good morning," he said softly. Lena gave a slight nod, her eyes never leaving the dough, as if her entire life rested within those calloused hands. Ethan tied on his apron and returned to his station, but his mind was fixed on one thought. She was the mystery he had to solve, no matter what. "Last Christmas?" Mia mentioned while tidying the checkout counter. Customers left tipped specifically for Lena. A lot. But she refused to keep any of it and insisted it be shared equally with the whole team. She paused, glancing toward the kitchen. Who even does that anymore? Back at the bread station, Ethan found himself unable to look away from Lena. She worked with mechanical precision. Every movement had purpose. Every breath was measured, as if she didn't have the luxury of wasting a single second. After 3 straight hours on her feet, Miguel offered her a break. Lena smiled politely, thanked him, and shook her head. No complaints. At lunch, Ethan deliberately sat next to Derek, who was busy adjusting the weekly schedule on an old computer. Ethan unwrapped his sandwich, trying to appear casual. "Hey," he began. "I've been wondering, if Lena's so good, why isn't she in charge of the pastry section? Seems like she'd be a perfect fit." Derek sighed and lowered his voice. "She's been offered the role multiple times, always says no. Just between us, I think something's going on up here," he said, tapping his temple. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, his curiosity deepening. "Last year, corporate sent a recognition package for her 10th work anniversary. It included a write-up in a culinary magazine. They called her Pastries, Timeless Artistry. But she asked us not to hang it up. Said she wasn't comfortable with the attention." Ethan frowned. He remembered approving that article himself, thinking it was a well-earned tribute. But no one had ever told him that the honoree had declined the recognition. "There's also the salary thing," Derek said, even quieter now, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Payroll once gave her a much larger raise than intended. She caught the error before anyone else and demanded it be corrected right away." Ethan blinked, surprised. That kind of reaction was rare, almost unheard of. "And sometimes," Derek added hesitantly, "she asks for part of her paycheck to be sent to an external account. Not savings, not investments. I only know because I overheard the old manager talking to HQ about it. It's not standard, but HR made an exception for her." Ethan's CEO instincts kicked in. Unusual financial behavior, off-book transactions. In his 15 years of running a company, those were red flags. But this didn't smell like fraud. His gut told him something else was at play, something deeply personal, maybe even painful. It demanded empathy, not suspicion. That afternoon, a special flour delivery arrived late, jeopardizing the next day's production. Unloading, inspecting, and storing it would take at least 2 extra hours. No one volunteered. "I'll stay," Lena said before anyone else could speak. "But you opened the store this morning," Miguel protested. "That's already a 14-hour shift." "I don't mind," she replied without hesitation. Ethan looked around. No one seemed shocked. This wasn't a one-off. This was normal for Lena. He lingered. "I can help," he said quietly to Miguel. Miguel blinked, surprised, then nodded. Maybe he thought Lena would go home if someone else stepped up, but he leaned in and whispered, "She won't leave. Believe me. I've tried." And Miguel was right. Lena worked into the evening, posture still strong, movements still sharp. But Ethan noticed something for the first time. The dark circles under her eyes, the slight heaviness in her steps. At 9:30 p.m., the job was finally done. Ethan was putting away some tools when he noticed Lena hesitating outside the manager's office. She knocked gently. "Sarah, sorry to bother you." Ethan pretended to clean nearby, ears tuned in. "I was just wondering if I could pick up some extra shifts next week. Maybe cover Madison's mornings." Sarah sighed. "Lena, you're already clocking overtime. I can't approve anything else without corporate sign-off. What if I clock out after 8 hours and just stay to help? Off the books?" "You know I can't let you do that." A long pause followed. "It's just that I really need—" Lena caught herself. "Never mind. Sorry to bother you." She exited the office with her usual calm face. But Ethan, trained to read subtle cues in negotiations and contracts, caught the flicker in her eyes, the barely contained desperation. As she reached for her bag, her usually steady hands trembled. She glanced at her phone, shoulders tightening. That night, Ethan tossed and turned on the stiff hotel bed. The image of Lena alone in that office, trying to hide the panic behind her eyes, haunted him. Breaking his own rule about keeping his identity secret, he opened his laptop and logged into the company's secure HR system. He needed answers. why someone would work themselves to the bone, avoid all recognition, and still beg for more hours. Lena's file opened. One line stopped him cold. The external account was listed not under savings or investment. Hamilton Financial Services loan repayment. Ethan froze. Not because it was complicated, but because it was too simple, too human. Lena wasn't just working to make a living. She was working to save something that had already been lost, and in that moment, Ethan understood. This woman wasn't just the heart of a single bakery. She was a painful reminder of everything he'd forgotten: integrity, loyalty, and the quiet dignity of those who carry burdens without complaint. That night, Ethan fell deep into a rabbit hole of internal reports and public databases. He traced every transaction, every breadcrumb. Hamilton Financial Services sounded like a legitimate lender, but in reality, they specialized in high-interest, predatory loans, circling around small, struggling businesses like vultures. Based on the payment history, Lena had been making consistent payments for nearly 7 years, yet the principal barely moved. Every dollar she earned was just enough to keep her head above water. The next morning, Ethan walked into the bakery. The scent of butter and yeast couldn't mask the bitterness rising in his chest. Lena was already there, thin, tired, and the dark shadows under her eyes had never looked deeper. "Off night?" Ethan asked as he tied his apron, trying to keep his tone casual. "Just a normal day," Lena replied, her eyes flicking toward him for a brief moment. But Ethan knew it wasn't a normal day. No one should live in a cycle of relentless work just to repay a debt that felt endless. And today he'd decided things were going to change. During the lunch break, while manager Sarah was busy dealing with a delayed shipment, Ethan quietly slipped into her office. Her computer was still logged in with Lena's personnel file open. A serious security lapse, one he knew he'd need to address later as CEO. But for now, it was a rare opportunity to uncover the truth. Lena's emergency contact information listed just one name: Jason Hart. Same last name, likely a brother or close relative. Ethan quickly cross-referenced with the data he'd found the night before, and a chill ran down his spine. Jason Hart, deceased. Date of death, 7 years ago. The exact time Lena began making debt payments. Why would she carry the burden of a loan for someone who was no longer alive? That afternoon, Ethan volunteered to make a delivery run to another location across town, a convenient cover to keep investigating without arousing suspicion. There, he sought out Marion, a regional manager who'd been with Golden Harvest for over a decade. "I'm doing some research on employee retention strategies," Ethan said, maintaining the persona of a corporate trainee. "Do you remember when Lena Hart was first hired?" Marion looked up slowly. Her expression softened. "Lena, poor girl. She came to us right after everything happened with her brother." "Her brother?" Ethan prompted. "Jason. They used to run a small bakery together, Heart and Home, up north. Their parents passed away early, so it was just the two of them. Jason handled the business, and Lena, she was the creative soul. Even back then, their croissants were something special." "What happened?" Ethan asked, feeling a tightening in his chest. "The recession hit them hard. Jason took out a large loan to renovate and expand the bakery. But the bank that pre-approved the loan collapsed. They had no choice but to go to a private lender," she said, voice dipping lower. "The interest rates were brutal. Then came the fire. Faulty wiring in the new equipment. The insurance didn't cover it because of a permit issue. Then the car crash," Ethan murmured. Marion nodded. "On the I-5. They said he fell asleep at the wheel. It happened just a month after the fire." Ethan sat silently in the delivery van on the way back, heart aching. Lena had lost everything: her family, her dream, her future. And instead of running from it all, she'd come to Golden Harvest and asked for a job. Any job. Not to survive, but to atone for something deeply buried. He connected to the company's financial system through his phone. No record of acquisition or partnership with Heart and Home. But buried deep in the archives of product development, he found an overlooked file, a proposal from Jason Hart, dated 8 years ago. A unique sourdough formula, complete with testing results and market analysis. Status: rejected. Ethan frowned. Why did this seem so familiar? He pulled over, opened his phone, and searched for Golden Harvest's Heritage Sourdough, now their second highest grossing product line. The ingredients, the ratios, the fermentation method, nearly identical to Jason's proposal. His blood ran cold. He accessed his executive permissions and combed through old internal emails. And there it was. A message from Vincent Harmon, then Vice President of Product Development, to the Executive Board. I've just finalized a breakthrough sourdough formula that could redefine our entire bread line. Vincent Harmon, the same executive who abruptly left the company 5 years ago amid a cloud of ethical misconduct. The man who had received a hefty bonus for the invention of the Heritage Sourdough. The next morning, Ethan arrived earlier than usual, 4:15 a.m. He wasn't surprised to find Lena already there, meticulously measuring ingredients with obsessive precision. "You're early," she said, without looking up. "Couldn't sleep?" Ethan replied, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal?" Her hands paused. "Depends on the question. The flame tattoo on your wrist. What does it mean?" For the first time since he'd met her, Ethan saw Lena's expression fracture. Pain flashed across her face before she quickly composed herself. "It's to remember something I lost." She turned back to her work, but her rhythm was broken, as if those few words had cracked the shell she'd carried for 7 long years. Her hands stopped moving completely. The familiar, practiced motions now faltered. She blinked, struggling to center herself, as if the smell of raw flour alone couldn't keep her grounded anymore. "A bakery?" Ethan said, barely more than a whisper. Leah spun around, alarm sharp in her eyes. "How do you know about Heart and Home?" "Jason's bakery," he said softly, sincerely. The rolling pin slipped from her hands, clattering against the countertop. She froze. "Who are you?" And in her eyes, exhausted, wary, but never broken, Ethan knew. It was time to tell the truth. "I'm someone who believes you've been paying off a debt that was never yours to carry." She instinctively stepped back, hands still dusted with flour, raised defensively. "I don't know what you're talking about." But her voice trembled. Her guard had a crack. Ethan took a slow step forward and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, the original proposal from Jason Hart, and laid it on the table between them. "Your brother submitted this to Golden Harvest 8 years ago. A naturally fermented sourdough made from heritage grains. A work of passion and precision." Lena stared at the page. Her eyes widened. How did you get this?" "Because I'm not Eli," Ethan said, gently but firmly. "My real name is Ethan Cole." Exercise dominated Ethan's thoughts. She froze. "And I'm the CEO of Golden Harvest Bakery." The words crashed through the room like a thunderclap. Lena's face went pale. Her hand gripped the counter as if it might be the only thing keeping her upright. "The CEO? But why would you?" "I went undercover to investigate irregularities at this branch," Ethan said. "But I ended up uncovering something far more significant. A truth this company has never had the courage to face." He pointed to the proposal. "This formula, Jason's legacy, became the foundation for the Heritage Sourdough line. One of Golden Harvest's most successful products for years." Lena shook her head slowly, her lips parting between confusion and denial. "That can't be. Jason said the company rejected it. He got the rejection letter just 2 weeks before the fire." Ethan nodded, eyes darkened by the bitterness of the truth. "On paper, yes. But in reality, Vincent Harmon, our then VP of Product Development, stole the formula and pitched it to the board as his own." The rejection letter was just a cover-up. Lena's legs seemed to give out. She collapsed onto a nearby stool, her eyes drifting into the fog of resurfacing memories. All these years. Those loaves of bread. They were made from my brother's formula. That's right, Ethan replied, his voice barely more than a whisper. And you've worked yourself to the brink trying to repay a debt that never should have been yours. The kitchen fell silent. Only the quiet hum of the refrigeration units remained, casting a pale yellow light on the face of a woman who had once been the pride of her family. "Why are you telling me this now?" Lena asked, her voice as soft as a breath. "Because justice should never be buried?" Ethan sat across from her, meeting her eyes without flinching. He opened his tablet and pulled up a detailed financial spreadsheet as traced the revenue from the sourdough line since it launched. Even with conservative estimates, this company has earned over $4 million from Jason's formula. Lena's mouth fell open, not at the number but at the confirmation of something she'd never dared believe. "And this," Ethan added, handing her another document, "is the original submission agreement Jason signed. It includes a clause granting Golden Harvest first right of refusal, but it also explicitly requires compensation if the idea is used." Her hands trembled, those same hands that had shaped thousands of loaves. Now, unsteady, as if holding dough for the first time. "Jason spent his entire youth perfecting that formula," she said, voice cracking. "It was his dream, to honor our family's name." She paused, her voice breaking further. "When the rejection came, it crushed him. That's why he took the loan. He wanted to prove the formula had value." Ethan lowered his head. For the first time in his career, guilt wasn't about legal risk or financial exposure. It was moral. "The night I discovered the truth, I couldn't sleep," he confessed. "I'd eaten that bread hundreds of times. Never once did I know who truly created it." "So what now?" Lena asked. Her eyes were glassy with tears, but her voice remained steady. Before Ethan could answer, the back door swung open. Derek and two early shift employees stepped inside, startled by the unusual scene unfolding in the kitchen. "Ella, is everything okay?" Derek asked, glancing between them. Ethan stood, his tone resolute. "Derek, call Sarah, then notify regional management to be here by 9 a.m. We're holding an emergency meeting." Derek hesitated. "I'm not sure I have the authority to." "Ethan Cole is calling the meeting." The name dropped like a bomb. Derek froze. "Yes," Ethan confirmed. "And this is a matter of serious importance?" He turned back to Lena, still seated in disbelief. "Now," he said gently, "we have some calculations to do." For the next 3 hours, as the bakery slowly filled with its usual morning bustle, Ethan and Lena locked themselves in the office, surrounded by stacks of documents, receipts, emails, and revenue reports. Titles and roles no longer mattered. Only the truth did, and the two of them were fighting, side by side, to reclaim it. The evidence was now undeniable. Jason Hart's sourdough formula, once summarily rejected, had become the foundation of one of the most successful products in Golden Harvest's history. Later that morning, in the makeshift meeting room inside the Seattle flagship store, Ethan stood before the assembled regional managers. Lena sat beside him, her apron still smudged with flour, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was silent, but her eyes no longer avoided contact. On the large screen, the full board of directors had joined via video call. Ethan felt his heart being pulled in two directions: shame for having profited from a legacy the company had stolen, and determination to speak the truth, no matter the cost. 8 years ago, he began, voice steady. Part of this company's success was built on theft. He clicked to the next slide. The original proposal appeared on screen, complete with Jason Hart's signature. This was the true origin of our heritage sourdough line. Not some stroke of brilliance from Vincent Harmon, but the legacy of the Hart family. a formula nurtured across generations, a formula that Jason's sister has been quietly safeguarding for years while shouldering a debt that was never hers. The room fell still. Faces shifted from disbelief to guilt, and in that silence, Ethan glanced at Lena, the woman who had carried a collapsed family's burden. Her posture straightened. Her eyes, still red-rimmed, burned with clarity. Acknowledging the truth had already lifted part of the weight. I've personally witnessed Lena Hart show up before sunrise and bake the very products that keep our stores thriving, Ethan continued, all while her family's legacy was erased, labeled under someone else's name. That ends today. What began as a regional meeting quickly escalated into a full company-wide video conference. The board of directors now stared out from the screen, expressions ranging from anxious to openly combative. Diane Winters, the board chairwoman, was the first to speak. This is completely out of line. You went undercover, made accusations against a former executive, all without board approval. With all due respect, Diane, Ethan cut in, voice firm. What's truly out of line is that one of our most iconic products is built on a stolen innovation. And the person who has kept that legacy alive is working 14-hour shifts in silence because of a debt caused by this company's failure to do what's right. He flipped to the next slide, a side-by-side comparison of Jason's original proposal and the current production formula. The resemblance was exact, down to the gram. Vincent Harmon stole this work. He collected hundreds of thousands in bonuses. Meanwhile, Jason Hart, the man behind the formula, died believing he was a failure. The room turned ice cold. Tension thickened like rising dough. Marcus Reynolds, the CFO, cleared his throat. This situation, while unfortunate, occurred nearly a decade ago. Harmon is long gone. This is no longer about legality, Ethan said, his voice sharp and unwavering. This is a moral obligation. The room seemed to hold its breath. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Richard Tanner, the board's most senior member. Ethan drew a deep breath. First, we immediately clear Lena Hart's debt with Hamilton Financial. Golden Harvest will pay it in full. A few board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Second, Ethan continued, we provide financial compensation to the Hart family, valued at the fair market worth of the formula, estimated at $3.2 million. Absolutely outrageous, Reynolds exploded, rising from his seat. Third, Ethan pressed on, undeterred. We create a new position, Director of Artisan Product Development. Under Lena's leadership, she will receive executive-level compensation and share in the profits of the products she oversees. You don't have the authority to, Diane warned. Then I'm formally requesting approval right now, Ethan said, looking directly into the camera. Or I will forward all of this documentation, including the evidence, to Food and Wine magazine, which has already expressed interest in profiling our heritage sourdough. The threat wasn't loud, but it hit with the weight of a hammer. Silence fell over the room. You wouldn't risk your own company's reputation, Ethan, Richard said, though his voice lacked conviction. I'll do whatever's necessary to make sure this company operates with integrity, Ethan replied. The harm was done 8 years ago. Today, I'm giving us a chance to make it right. No one spoke. The tension was so thick it could have snapped like a wire. Then, a gentle voice cut through the air, as clear as a blade. I'd like to say something. Lena. She sat upright, looking directly at the screen, her voice resonating through the room. For the last 8 years, I've given everything to Golden Harvest. I've arrived before dawn, stayed late after closing, worked weekends and holidays. Not because I loved the company, but because I needed to pay off the debt that destroyed my brother. Her voice grew stronger. Every day, I watched customers enjoy the very sourdough recipe Jason spent his youth perfecting, a recipe that was stolen. I don't want millions. I want his name placed where it belongs, on his own creation. I want to finish paying off the debt that crushed him. And I want to make sure no other small baker ever has their lives' work stolen by corporations that see ideas as profit, not as people." No one argued. No one dared. A long pause hung over the meeting. Then Diane spoke again, her voice more subdued but clear. "Miss Hart, would you allow us 30 minutes to discuss this privately?" Lena nodded silently. But the quiet dignity in her posture earned the respect of everyone in the room. When the board returned, something had shifted. Their eyes no longer darted away. Diane's voice carried a tone of acceptance. "We've reached a consensus. Golden Harvest will settle your remaining debt with Hamilton Financial in full." Lena didn't react, except to clasp her hands tightly in her lap. Ethan watched every subtle movement. "We will also establish a trust fund in Jason Hart's name," Diane continued, "with an initial endowment of $2 million to be used at your discretion. Additionally, you will assume the new position Ethan described, Director of Artisan Product Development, with full creative control and appropriate compensation." Ethan turned to Lena. Her expression remained steady, but he noticed the slight tremble in her fingers, a tremble not from fear, but from years of emotion finally surfacing. "There's one more condition," Diane added. "We would like you to become the face of our new product line, renamed the Hart Heritage Collection. Jason's story and legacy would be central to our brand narrative." For the first time during the entire meeting, Lena hesitated. She turned to Ethan, her voice barely audible. "They want to use Jason's story to sell bread. They want to give him the credit he deserves," Ethan replied gently. "To place him at the heart of every loaf." Lena looked down at her hands burned and calloused from years of labor in front of hot ovens. Now, they were asking her to step out from the shadows, not just to share Jason's story, but to show the world why it mattered. "I'll need time to think," she said quietly. "Of course," Ethan agreed. "But there's one thing that doesn't require any debate." He turned to the board. "Effective immediately, Jason Hart will be credited as the original creator of the Heritage sourdough formula in all official and public documentation. That's non-negotiable." Diane nodded. "We agree." The meeting ended. Lena remained seated, staring at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. For years those hands had labored under the weight of an invisible past. Now, with the burden lifted, they felt strangely unfamiliar. "What would Jason want?" Ethan asked, once the room had emptied. Lena looked up, and for the first time, allowed the tears to fall freely. "And he'd want his work to be recognized," she said, through a quiet sob. "He'd want to be remembered. Not as a failure, but as someone who created something that mattered." 6 months later, Ethan stood at the back of the Seattle bakery, where it had all begun. The space was now vibrant with light and hope. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, the place buzzed with life. And at the center of it all stood Lena Hart. She wore a crisp white chef's coat, embroidered in gold over the chest. Hart Heritage. It was still Lena, but no longer the version hidden in shadows. Her steps were firmer, her gaze clearer. Someone who had chosen the light for herself. "My brother Jason believed baking was about honoring tradition, and also about embracing innovation," Lena said to the gathered press. "This product line is our tribute to that belief, a bridge between the past and the future." The bakery was no longer just another Golden Harvest location. Its sign now read, "Hart and Harvest Bakery, a union of memory and purpose." Through the glass partition, customers could watch the entire baking area, professional chefs creating masterpieces out of dough and fire. Beside it stood a sleek, curated display featuring exclusive experimental pastries, new creations from Lena and her fellows, where ideas came to life daily. But the true centerpiece, the one that brought Lena to tears the first time she saw it, was the bronze plaque by the entrance, in memory of Jason Hart, the unnamed baker who rose before dawn to nurture a dream. His passion, creativity, and perseverance live on in every loaf we bake. After the presentation, Lena quietly slipped away from the media crowd and approached a small group gathered by the kitchen doors. Independent bakers, each of them starting over after setbacks. They were the first cohort of the Heart Fellowship, a support initiative Lena launched using her brother's memorial trust. Making isn't just technique, she told them. It's heart. It's what you're trying to say with your hands. The shop had changed. The brand had changed. But most of all, Lena Hart had changed. The dark circles were gone. Her posture no longer slumped under invisible weight. She was a woman of a new day, grounded, strong, and driven by purpose. She still arrived early. She still worked hard. But now she did it, not out of fear, but in honor of a legacy that was finally taking shape. When people mention Jason's name now, how does it feel? Ethan asked as the ceremony wound down. Lena paused, then smiled. A real smile, quiet but complete. It's strange, she admitted. Sometimes I still wake up panicked, thinking I have to rush and make a loan payment. Then I remember. Her eyes drifted to the bronzed plaque. Now I'm building something, not just surviving. Art Heritage has already surpassed sales projections, Ethan said with a teasing grin. You're trying to say, I told you so to the board, aren't you? Lena tilted her head, smirking. Maybe just a little, he chuckled. Then, more seriously, he added, but really, how do you feel about all of this? The press, the responsibility, going from an anonymous baker to the face of something this big. Lena glanced around, the fellowship members prepping their first batch, the display case filled with the loaves Jason once dreamed of. Worth it, she said softly, because every time someone sees Jason's name, or a young baker finds their voice, I know we didn't just bake bread. We built something meaningful. From the kitchen window, Ethan could see the fellowship apprentices slipping on aprons one by one, their faces lit with a mix of nerves and excitement, the honest emotions of people stepping into something new. Looking at them, Lena said, standing beside him, I see Jason and myself, dreamers, thinking hard work alone was enough to make things right. She paused, her gaze distant. We just didn't know how fragile the world could be. But they have something now you didn't, Ethan replied, eyes still on the apprentices. They have you. That afternoon, as the bakery settled into its usual rhythm, Ethan noticed something unexpected. Lena was packing up to leave. For the day. Diet? At 3 p.m. On a weekday? He asked, surprised. I have tickets to the botanical gardens, she said, a faint blush on her cheeks. First time I've bought anything just to relax in. I don't know how long. Marina from the fellowship suggested it, so I thought I'd try. Ethan smiled, genuinely. Good for you. You deserve it. As she reached the door, Lena paused, glancing back at the kitchen where she'd spent nearly a decade of her life. At her former station now stood a young baker, hand-picked, mentored, and trusted by Lena herself. You know what the strangest part is, she said, voice quiet and thoughtful. For so many years, I baked just to survive. I never thought I'd find joy in it again. She gave a small laugh, one that didn't hide anything. But watching those young bakers find their own voice in every loaf, it reminded me why Jason and I fell in love with baking in the first place. Then she pushed open the door and stepped out into the sunlight, for the first time in years, not because she was exhausted or escaping, but because she chose to. Through the window, Ethan watched her walk down the street. Her gait had changed, no longer stooped under the weight of invisible burdens. Each step carried freedom. Lena stopped at a corner cafe. Something inside caught her eye. After a moment's hesitation, she walked in. Curious, Ethan strolled by and glanced through the window. There she was, sitting alone at a small wooden table, a croissant and coffee before her. But what made his chest tighten wasn't the setting. It was the look on her face. For the first time since he'd met her, Lena was enjoying a pastry she hadn't baked. Not for critique, not for training, not under pressure, just enjoying. In that simple, unguarded moment, Ethan realized the full measure of what they'd achieved. It wasn't just justice, or money, or recognition. It was the restoration of a joy long denied. Lena looked up and met his gaze through the glass. She raised her cup slightly. A silent thank you. Ethan nodded and smiled, then continued on his way, leaving her to savor a rare moment of peace. Behind him, the bakery buzzed with life. The rhythm of kneading dough, the hum of ovens, the laughter of young bakers. Jason Hart's legacy was safe, and the sister he left behind was finally free. In that kitchen, new hands were learning an old rhythm, one that once felt like a burden, but now was magic once again.